50 Shades of Red, Anirban.
That's the one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all familiar with anger. On a previous podcast, we did say that it was mad, glad, and sad were the three that people could actually name as they felt them.
A great way to visualize it, if you've ever seen the Pixar movie Inside Out, the little emotion anger, he does a great job of demonstrating how you feel inside your brain.
Yeah, with the fire coming out of his head.
Fire coming out of his head, going, it's putting vegetables where they don't belong. Broccoli on pizza.
Yeah, it's amazing. And also there's another more adult reference, I think, in recent culture, which was the TV series The Bear, which is also on Disney Plus, actually. And I think that the main actors won some Emmys for it, right?
Yeah, he won a ton of Emmys, the guy who's also in Shameless. Yeah,
that's Jeremy Allen White. He was Lip in Shameless, which is fantastic. But it's really interesting because there's so much aggression as opposed to anger. Let's separate the two and we can talk through that today. You've got Carmy and Ritchie, and I mean, they're cousins, but they're not cousins. I think they're just family. And wow, I mean, I found it hard to get through the first two episodes because...
It's so high adrenaline.
Oh, God, I feel like I was going to have a heart attack while I watched it, right?
So intense. Yeah.
And actually, that's quite interesting too, because they talk about anger with heart attacks and heart problems, because anger really raises your cortisol levels, because anger is actually an action emotion. It propels you to do something. Now, what we've got to figure out, right, and help you guys with today is you want to decide something to do that's good, as opposed to
turning to violence.
Yeah, well, there's that crazy scene where Ritchie goes outside with a gun, right?
That's it. Literally pulls out a gun because he's so angry with the crowd outside.
Well, yeah, so it's so extreme, right? So, Anirban, what would you say? How would you define anger?
Yes. So in my head, I think of anger usually as things that make me angry are usually situations of unfairness or unjustness. When there's someone to blame, that's what sort of thing that gets me angry. Yeah,
absolutely. That's a really good definition. It's when there's something in the way. Mm-hmm. So it's even an obstacle, something is in the way, and unfairness can be a psychological obstacle, but there's something stopping you from doing something and you don't like that. So maybe somebody's stopping you from saying something. Somebody's stopping you from expressing yourself. As a child, you felt a lot of anger towards your parents because they had to say no to loads of things and you didn't like that, right?
Yes. And you probably made them angry as a result.
Well, yeah, your maybe a reaction or whatever. My mum would say, you're like a briar. You're as cross as a briar. Mm. So cross is how the word we use a lot in England and Ireland, I'd say, to express the word anger, because culturally, I definitely think the English definitely don't want to be seen to get angry.
You're right. Yeah, it's definitely, I'd say, a repressed emotion. It's a bit of keep calm and carry on.
Yes.
Back to that again. Yeah.
And I think, I got cross at my daughter. And, on our cheat sheet, on our feeling cheat sheet, it takes you through all the different kind of, as you said, 50 shades of anger. So it takes you through all the different nuances. Because sometimes when you think of anger, you think of the bear, like those two guys going nuts in the restaurant, everyone's aggressive, or you think of anger in Pixar. But I think actually what's really interesting is when you go through the nuances of anger and you look at our cheat sheet and you've got frustration.
Yes. So we have not being annoyed or cranky or furious, upset or rage.
Yeah, so like I was saying, I think it's often the more subtle forms of anger. And I know personally within our family, myself and Anirban and our daughter, it took us a long while, as we all started to grow together and learn about feelings, using the feelings cheat sheet, to be okay with each other expressing anger, and realizing that irritation is it's got anger underneath it, and so like there is, when you're irritated about something, like I could be irritated because the house isn't tidied up, because ultimately I do want things to be a bit more systematic. And I don't mean that in a kind of perfectionist way, as I talked about before, but I suppose you'd like your child to put away her things after her. So I think it's really interesting interesting how, and even myself, you know, we're going to do, because anger is such a big emotion, we've decided that we'll get Anirban to do part 1 because it's really, really important for men to express their feelings. Yeah. And actually, that's probably something I feel the most angry about, is that in today's society, we're here in 2023 and we still have a situation where like back in my mum's day, you know, can't cook, won't cook. We have can't feel, won't feel. Mm-hmm. So actually, one of the reasons we started up this podcast was so that Anirban, a man of today, could express his feelings on the airwaves and everyone could listen in and go, okay, that's kind of normal. That's kind of okay. I can do that, right? You know, lead by example.
It's doable.
And that's the really cool thing about anger, is actually anger helps you to take action. And if you can use anger to channel something good, you can actually change something about the world. You know, you think of the Me Too movement, you think of Black Lives Matter. So there's a lot of good stuff within anger, but I think we get very confused because we just have the aggressive version of expressing anger out there. So one of my favorite quotes from the show The Bear is Carmy himself says, I guess all the time I feel like I'm kind of trapped because I can't describe how I'm feeling.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And actually from Brené Brown's book, she's got a great little kind of diagram which shows that, you know, anger is the top level emotion, but really behind it might be several other underlying emotions, which could be things like fear or anxiety or guilt or hurt or shame, a whole host of different emotions that could essentially bubble up that lead to anger.
Yeah, there's loneliness as well, I think, you know, or grief, you think of particularly in The Bear. Yes. And actually also, if we go back to Pixar, you know, the kid, I can't remember her name, she's lonely really because they've moved to a new city. So again, I think the whole idea with these feelings is, you know, as we always say, feel it to reveal it. Yeah. That if you sit and unpack it, you know, you just want to check in, you know, what shade of red are you actually feeling? You know, it might not be rage, it could be something more subtle. And then maybe, is it even anger? You know, is there something underneath it all? And again, we don't have the answers. You have the answers. So, you know, we're here just to kind of explore and go do a deep dive. So you can sit with your feelings, using the feelings cheat sheet, and just kind of explore, you know, see what's there.
Yeah, so I'd like to share my experiences of anger. And you know what, as I do this again for our 3rd podcast, it's getting a lot easier for me using the cheat sheet, of course, but then just to explore and talk about my feelings more openly. It's certainly something that Mary Ellen and I do a lot. And it's great to be able to just let them out there. So
absolutely, you know, Anirban, it just makes me think of Sticky Sweet Repeat.
Oh yeah, that's our catchphase. So yes. So I guess on my current experiences of anger, I mean, I'm pretty, most people say I'm a pretty zen guy. I am a meditation teacher after all, but it wouldn't be right of me to say I wouldn't get angry. I do. It's a natural emotion. These feelings arise in me. And typically on a regular basis, they come from parenting. And that is my number one.
Shout out to all the parents who feel frustrated.
That is the number one thing that will ultimately sort of drive me to feel that little bit of anger. It's bubbling under. And usually what's the cause of it? It's the frustration. It's the cajoling of our 10-year-old daughter. It's, you know, telling her to turn the TV off. It's telling her to, you know, whatever it is, get changed, brush your teeth. You know it. It's hard work. It's the repetition. And then it's the constant attention, all those parenting vibes. That's the one. That's the one that really gets me, should we say, a little bit angry. And beside those physical things, it's emotional labor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, labor that traditionally we've said before, a lot of women have taken on. And I think this is really interesting because anger and boundaries are completely interlinked. So when you feel like somebody has crossed your boundary, and we've got a really brilliant card in the pack called Line, Line, you know, cross the line. And I think even as you're saying about Nirvana, children will just take and take and take. And I think, even good parenting, slow parenting, calm parenting has to have a boundary. And there has to be a point where you feel like, okay, I've given enough for you. Now it's time for me, and I think it's very interesting. And I love how honest Anirban is about this, because I think, traditionally, and even today in 2023, mothers do way more emotional labor, and lockdown, this was even more true. But you can see once the guy does step up, like my husband has, it starts to encroach on his own free time, his own personal time, his own boundary. Once you become the person that your child can go to with their emotional issues, once you're buying the gifts for parties, all of these things, then your child will just keep going to you. And I think that's extremely draining. And so you've got to be very good in your home with boundaries. This is my time now, and you meditate and we close the door. This is mummy's time now to read. This is dad time now to watch his program or whatever it is. But I think it's so interesting to hear you grapple with this now. And I know so many dads who don't grapple with it because they're not emotionally available for their children. So children don't go to them.
They're off to their man caves.
Well, yeah. And so I think that's what's really exhausting. And I think then the anger comes up. Why is she coming to me with all this stuff?
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm happy to do it. That's the effort and the labor I put in, shall we say.
And I did read an amazing statistic about work and anger, how like 40% of, employees in the UK do not express their anger because they feel, like we're saying, culturally, it's not acceptable. Yes. And actually, it's the suppression of that anger that's the problem, though. So if you can express your anger calmly, sounds like an oxymoron, but again, something with practice you can do, then you will be okay. And this is when they've done studies in work. If you feel that you could have gone to a manager and expressed how you felt, that, you were frustrated about something.
Exactly.
Then a year later or whatever, a month later, whatever, they've done these studies to show the person can't even remember being angry.
Remember.
And I think it's very interesting when you say, I was trying to think of examples for this podcast the last time I've been angry. And actually, I can't think of a lot of examples. But what I realized then when I went a little bit deeper before we came on here today is that actually you and I express anger to each other through the feelings card, the face-to-face feelings. We talk quite frequently. We use the words, and also we permit Nirvana to express her anger, because anger is different. Feeling is different than a behavior. It's okay to say, I feel angry, frustrated. It's not okay to hit somebody or break something or do something violent. And there is a separation between a feeling and a behavior for all you parents out there. And so I think that's what's really interesting. If we can actually find the middle ground, like the healthy middle way where you can actually, you're not boiling over with rage. You're not like, throwing something or breaking something. And you're not like being tight-lipped and not saying how you feel. I can't tell anyone how I feel. No one will understand. I can't tell my boss. I can't tell my partner. But there's that middle place where you just say, I feel frustrated.
Yes. It's literally being able to let it out, vocalizing. And actually, a lot of what I've been learning is I've been doing it face to face and vocalizing, but journaling too, writing it down. That is in my head as good as.
Absolutely. Well, certainly if you haven't got someone you feel you can speak to, you might be on your own emotional journey here, and the person that you're with, whether you work with them or whether they're in your home, might not be ready yet. Okay. I do think you can bring children into this feeling things quite quickly, because unlike us, and this is very interesting because I think this is going to lead on to the story you were telling me just before we came on here, is that children have not been conditioned to keep their feelings inside when they're very young. So you can actually tap into kids' feelings quite quickly. And with very little practice, they will express them. Unlike culturally, you and I, where, we were kind of taught to contain our anger.
Yes, 100%. And in my upbringing, the school I went to, absolutely all about the rules, was known as being one of the strictest schools in the country. It was just not acceptable to express your emotions, to show that you were, upset or angry or whatever emotion you felt. I had so many examples of me with just reason for being angry, but not allowing it to be expressed.
So can you remember a specific example, Anirban, from your schooling or childhood?
Yes, absolutely. I have many examples. One of them is my form teacher when I started secondary school. So I would have been 11 years old. And, it was normal, obviously, for a teacher to engage with you and call you your name. However, I was always referred to as simply Saha. I would never get called my first name, Anirban.
Why was that?
I never asked, but I'm sure I should have. But I presume it's because they simply couldn't pronounce it or weren't brave enough, shall we say, to give it a go and even attempt my name. But the fact was also they never asked, how do you pronounce your name?
And so when you say this is
pretty much all the school teachers in my entire school. And that never stopped to the day when I left at 18. So I was always called Saha.
Hold on a second. Go back a second so I understand this.
Yeah.
So you've got like the roll call. Is that what you mean? It's John, Mary, Jane, whoever, right? And so...
Even that roll call, yeah.
Yeah. And so you call out everybody's first name.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to you, they call out Saha.
Correct.
Which is your surname instead of Anirban, which is your first name.
Yeah, that's it.
And this made you feel angry?
Yes, angry, a multitude of emotions.
Tell us a little bit more about what you were feeling.
I mean, so I'm going to take my cheat sheet here because I felt angry, frustrated, upset, annoyed, vexed, resentful. Why did everyone else get their first name called out and not me, right? And this went on, I mean, literally till I was 18. So.
What's interesting here, though, is that you never said anything to anyone about this.
Yeah, I know. I felt, well, this goes back to my parents, and they were always of the idea that don't make a fuss. Don't make fuss. And I'm sure I mentioned it to my parents, like, well, they don't call me, Anirban, they just call me Saha. And they said, just don't worry. They say, ignore them. And their sort of, should we say, solution was just show them, do well in your exams and show them you are, better than them. In a way, shall we say.
It's very interesting. So we keep coming back to this when it comes to feelings. It shows you, and we're back to the assimilation, right? We're back to the Indian assimilation of, and this is why I think, again, anger is a really interesting one. I did talk about Black Lives Matter early and Me Too. And I think, minorities are not permitted the same freedom of emotional expression. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in, even in 2023, we've, and it's the same for women. We're not a minority, we're half the population. And this is why we have to do a part 2 of this. But also for you, it's, you're kind of not allowed to rock the boat.
No. And
acceptance.
And that's on a daily basis,
Did you feel that expressing it to your parents, but would you have expressed it to your parents as anger?
No, never.
What would you feel like? It
frustration, annoyance.
So was there a little bit of being able to say it to somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I told it to my mum and dad, maybe, but I'd probably only mention it once, and they'd just say ignore it, and then, as in, ignore it, move on. Just do your schoolwork and do well in your exams.
And so we come back to that word of reparenting. So, you think of yourself as an 11-year-old, and anyone else out there listening to this, your parents didn't have the capabilities to help you with those feelings at the time. But what's wonderful now is that you can go back and, give some love to that 11-year-old self and reparent yourself. Because really, we can only start understanding our emotions once we stop fighting them or ignoring them.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So again, it's back to feel it, to reveal it. And so there's a couple of little questions here I'm just going to call out that might be helpful for anyone listening. What is the source of my anger? Has someone crossed my boundaries? We talked about that earlier. What or who is in my way? And how is it in my way? What needs of mine are not being met?
Yeah, those are great questions. I mean, my coping mechanism back in the day would have been just listening to heavy metal music. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Get the old Rage Against the Machine up there. You know, that was honestly my release.
Guns N' Roses for me.
Right. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, and that's an okay coping strategy. You know what I mean? Out of the coping strategies that we have, music is a really good one. Again, music is one of our practice cards for the Habits Pack. I mean, it's not a bad way to go. If you know that your parents are not going to be able to hold you in a safe place and talk through your feelings, and not everybody has the capacity to do this, then, that's a good coping strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I went straight to the dark stuff. I went into Slayer, Pantera, Sepultura, you name it. The harder it was, the greater the release almost. But I mean, it wasn't just, music was one, but ultimately I was drinking as a teenager too. That was, I guess, another bad coping strategy, shall we say, of dealing with this unpent anger.
Well, culturally, I think, probably the number one coping strategy in the UK and Ireland, certainly, to deal with anger, and I would probably say all feelings, is actually alcohol. Let's have a drink. And I had brunch yesterday with two really good friends of mine, and, they're on their own personal growth journeys, and they were saying how it kind of makes them sad how everything in work is about the Friday night drinks, of alcohol. And we now have, it's like, haven't we moved on from that? And, you're talking about growing up in the 90s. I mean, that's 30 years ago, right? And, Oprah always says, know better, do better. And I feel like we've got enough information now, but it's not getting filtered down into everyday practice, into practices with managers. When they have budget, they spend it on a night out. I mean, one of my friends said she'd much rather the gym membership. And the other one said, I'd love if somebody came in and did meditation with us. And the amount of money that's spent on alcohol as a kind of a solution to stress within a team is kind of insane, actually. And that's on the corporate level, but even a personal level. So it becomes habitual. Yeah. I feel bad. I don't know why I feel bad. I have a drink and it releases some tension, right? Yeah. And so then that's, you grow up with that. And then, it's kind of really difficult. And I've met so many people on a personal level coaching is, it takes a long time to unlearn those habits then, right?
Absolutely. And that's why learning something like a meditation practice, a quietize practice can totally revolutionize your coping strategy.
And I was thinking, as I left my friends, as I walked away from the brunch and was coming home, how, it's been quite a while since I worked in the corporate world for a top man and Topshop. And how I don't feel as angry anymore. And is that because I don't work there? Or is it now because I have good coping strategies like meditation? And I certainly think that when you quietize, even for 5 minutes every day, it allows everything just to settle down a little bit. And so, anger is telling you to do something. But I think the great way to do it is just to pause. Think about what you want to do. Think about all your different options. One is saying F off to somebody and what the F and all of that. And, being aggressive, it's an option. But there are many other options. And when you have a pause kind of written in to the way you act, and I was considered very fiery, a stereotypical Irish person, right? And actually, when I meet people now years later from fashion, when I worked in fashion, that's the one thing they say to me. I've still all of the energy and all the passion without being so reactive. And I think is that, obviously sitting and doing quietize, but also sitting and expressing my feelings, every two or 3 days to you, and then daily, journalizing. So you kind of just become more emotionally flexible. Or as my mother would say, I'm laughing because I can literally hear her voice, don't fly off the handle. So I don't fly off the handle as much anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty well-known saying. In our language, in Bangla, Bengali, the word for anger is rag. And I'd often hear my mum say it just in, annoyance with my dad over usually something typically mundane. But I'd also hear the word mejaj, which means it's to do with temper. like someone has shown their temper, besh, or something, like showing their temper. And an example would have been just a couple of weeks ago when we came back from Download Festival, and I asked how they got on looking after Nirvani, and my mum went on to describe that when she went to, I think, brush my daughter's hair, that she showed her temper. She said, "Besh, mejas dakache." She was really showing a temper. And she was frustrated, and essentially she didn't want her to. She wanted.
And was your mum frustrated by this? Was that how she was saying that it's not okay for her to show her temper?
Essentially, that's what she's saying. She was saying she was annoyed by this. She wasn't well behaved, almost, shall we say?
I know, and I've seen this too. This is so interesting. I mean, my mum has passed away now, but I can remember. So we have brought our 10-year-old up to be very assertive, and they do a lot of this in the school as well about no means no, and it's definitely something that I would say even coached my daughter on, because I feel, I didn't feel I had a voice young enough, and I accepted things that, as even like you, and again, we're going to do a whole other part 2 on this, but it's really interesting how your mom doesn't like Nirvani to say no and be assertive.
Yes,
that's
absolutely
considered having a temper.
Correct. Yeah, it's true.
And I have actually witnessed them trying to get Nirvani to do something, and when she said no, they will keep pushing it.
Oh yeah, I know. I find it quite hilarious to watch.
And I bet you, like anyone else out there with parents and grandparents helping out, there is a difference even in generations, right? Generational.
There's the expectation of them to conform like we used to, basically.
Yeah, I mean, my mum's generation, she passed away a little while ago now, a year and a half, and she was 82 when she passed away. And that generation is actually called the silent generation. And, like children should be seen and not heard, and, keep calm, carry on. And all of those, all of those
old stereotypes, yeah.
Yeah, they were her calling cards, So, yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So what's the equivalent in Irish then?
Well, actually, Scailge, the Irish word for is farrig, F-E-A-R-G, so tá farrig urim.
Okay.
I feel angry. There's also some really beautiful shanachals, which is the sayings about anger. And I always think that they almost reveal more about the Irish culture than just the basic words. Is minnick of rish veil dinna a shroan.
Sounds amazing.
Well, veil is the Irish word for mouth, and shroan is the word for nose. And so that's really the essence of that, is that it's often a person's mouth that breaks off their nose, doing something to spite your nose. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Right, yes.
And so this is kind of like speaking in anger, really.
Yeah.
So that would have been definitely, like I was saying, that silent generation of, don't speak your anger, keep it to yourself.
Yes.
Another saying that I think is more in line with what we're talking about today, which is like, using anger to generate good action and change and bring about fundamental change, is this fantastic saying. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Isminnic arina bromach gobach koppel kushamach.
Okie doke, go through that one.
And so koppel is the Irish word for horse. And the essence of this really is that often a stubborn horse or a wild horse makes a great rider.
Interesting.
So, like actually if you can harness that feeling and again, physiologically, they say that, within your body, the energy that's created through anger is really powerful.
Sure.
But the problem is if it's not harnessed. And so I think of the
I'm
horse, I think of the rider on the horse. And literally, if you imagine that your anger is a horse and you can ride it to a great place, it can take you somewhere.
Right. It's your sort of mechanism or mode that you can use, your mode of transport to get you from A to B. So I want to finish on today how I've now switched this and flipped it so that I use anger as a catalyst for change and making my life easier, shall we say. And the example here is my daughter, when she was younger, she always would interrupt when I was meditating. She'd come in, she'd say, Dad, I need something. I need your help. And there was I had to draw the line. I had to call out the boundary and say, it's not acceptable. It's not cool to interrupt me. I'll be with you in 20 minutes. And it was a case of a bit of repetition and calling it out and just saying, no, just, this is my time. And she's now at a stage, she's 10 years old now. And, it's been a couple of years since she knows that if I'm sitting there meditating, it's not the time to interrupt. So, it's been amazing to see that difference.
Yeah, it's like a spark for change, isn't it?
That's exactly it.
And, when we both do our quietize practice, me also, because we both can take the time out for quietize to sit in silence. And it's the same for me. So to sum up, anger is definitely an action emotion. We have a practice card that's called ACE, ACE, Action Creates Energy. And I think that's really a lovely way to sum up now, is to use your anger for action. Or as Brené Brown says, anger is an emotion that we need to transform into something life-giving. Courage, love, change, compassion, and justice. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode, and we will definitely come back next week to a part 2 because of women and anger and how we are permitted or not permitted in our cultures to express our anger. There is so much to unpick there.
So see you next time. Taka hobe.
Slán go fóill.